Starting YouTube with everything you have to learn all at once is a really steep learning curve. And so I started with iMovie, and it was a godsend. iMovie was great until it wasn't, and I started to get really frustrated with it because I started to hit limitations. You've got limitations with layering, with titles, with backgrounds, with animations. Those were the things that really drove me mad trying to get videos out. And whilst you can do some of those things with Keynote, it really adds to the time it takes to create a simple video. So I finally caved in. I spent the money to buy Final Cut Pro, and I thought all my problems would be solved. And then I opened it. It sort of looked familiar, but honestly, I just couldn't get started. In some very specific ways, it just didn't work like iMovie. And so I couldn't even get a clip onto the timeline. So in this video, I'm going to show you around the Final Cut Pro interface and show you how it compares with the iMovie interface, so you'll know your way around it really well. And so you can find all the things you used in iMovie, you can find them in Final Cut Pro. And at the end of this video, I'm going to introduce you to the one thing you just have to know so that you can get started straight away after this video with Final Cut Pro. Okay, so here we are in iMovie, and I'm just going to remind you of the interface, and then we're going to go over to Final Cut Pro and look at the equivalents there. And as you can see, we're in iMovie. I've got a project underway already. On the left hand side you've got the project media, and then you've got all your media here under the heading of My Media. On the right hand side you've got your viewer, and that can view either the things that are up here or the timeline. And then at the bottom obviously you've got your timeline, and in the timeline you've got the main timeline, you've got your overlay there, you've got titles and backgrounds, and then you've got your sound effects, and then your ongoing sound. So that's the simple iMovie layout. And just to point out the key functions in here, obviously you've got over here an ability to control the size of the timeline or how detailed it is on the screen. Up here, as well as My Media, you've got your titles, you've got your backgrounds and transitions. And then over here, some other functions, your cropping tools, things like zooming in, things like the Ken Burns effect, and the clip filter. That's essentially iMovie, and we're now going to switch over to Final Cut Pro and have a look at that interface. Okay, so as you can see, we're now in Final Cut Pro, and it sort of looks similar, doesn't it? A little bit similar. So over here, you've got what looked like the list on the left of your projects. Then here, you've got your media. As you can see, all the media that's going onto the timeline is in there. Here you've got your viewer. Over here you've got something new which is called the inspector, and that does some of the things that were previously along the top of the screen. And there's two other bits to be aware of. Up here on the left you've got titles. That's all you really need to know at this stage. It does more than iMovie, but at the moment we're just trying to replicate what we could do in iMovie. And then there are other buttons along there that dealt with things like backgrounds, transitions, and so on. Those are now in a completely different place, and they are hidden at the moment over here. If you can see that, these two buttons deal with effects and then transitions. So let's just click on one of those, and now you can see effects. Go to one of these. So if you wanted to, for example, have a border around something, this is where you would go. This is also where you would go for picture-in-picture. This other one is transitions. So fade to color is instead of the previous fade to black you had on iMovie, and then other transitions, cross dissolve, for example, here. Those are the two additional buttons that replace what we had in iMovie. And now for the final key thing you need to know in order to start using Final Cut Pro. And this was the surprising thing to me, that I just couldn't get started with Final Cut Pro. I thought that probably some of the shortcuts would be the same as iMovie, some of the things would be in the same place, and so I could get started and then find my way around. And this thing stumped me at the start, and I'll show you what it is and how you get around it so you can get started. So let's head over to the screen and we'll look at iMovie first. When you open iMovie, you get the opportunity to create a project. And so you click on that, you click movie, and it takes you in and you can get started. And all you do is you import media. You can click on here to pull up your files and do it that way. You can go to Finder and click on your files and just drag and drop them in. It's really easy, and then once you've got them in your imported media, you just drag them onto the timeline and you can get started with editing. Well, you can't do that with Final Cut Pro. It's just not the way it happens. What iMovie has done has removed a lot of options in relation to the creation of a project. And there are actually 3 steps you have to go through in order to get started on Final Cut Pro. And so we're going to go through those 3 steps now so that you can always get started with Final Cut Pro. Okay, so here we are. We've got the Final Cut Pro interface opened. You can't just create a project, import files, pull them to the timeline and get started on Final Cut Pro. The first thing you have to do is create a library. So we're going to do that now. And the way to do that is you go in Final Cut Pro, you go to File, New, Library. Call it something like My New Library. See where it's saved in Movers, and you press Save. And there we go. You can see My New Library is here. So I'm going to click on that. Now the second thing you have to do is create an event. You can have multiple events in a library, but generally I would suggest you just have one library with one event in it. You do that by having clicked on the library you want. Again, you go to File, New, Event. This has got the event name by date. A lot of people use dates for events, and we can use that as well. So we've got event name, it's in My New Library, and we're going to click OK. Then there's one further thing you have to do, and you have to create a project within the event. This is key because until you get to the project, you can't put any files on the timeline. So you need a project as well. So we've got the event highlighted. You can see the event is like a star here. Again, we go to File, New, Project this time. And this time we're going to call it New Beach Project. Now you can see it's not over here, it's over here, New Beach Project. And now you've got New Beach Project up, you can now drag and drop files into this media area. Once you've got them there, you can pull them onto the timeline. Let me just show you them going into the media area and then onto the timeline. So let me just pull this clip over here, drop it over there. You can see it's now in the media area, and then now I can pull that down and position it onto the timeline, easy. And now I can start playing with that. And while we've got the clip down there, just as a real final bonus, I just want to show you at this stage how you can zoom in and zoom out of the timeline just as you did in iMovie. In Final Cut Pro, you use the shortcut of Command plus to expand it and Command minus to reduce it. So with those tips, you should be able to get started at least with importing files, getting them on the timeline, and at least be able to start to edit in the way you did in iMovie. See you on the next one.